So I wanted to start talking today a little bit about myself, but I wanted to start with a Chinese proverb, and I will probably interject a few things. If you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. That's definitely true for my husband. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a month, get married. And I thought, you married the wrong person if it's a month, but okay. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. But if you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone else. From that, I am going to talk about generational humanitarianism. Does anybody have an idea of what that might be? Generational humanitarianism. So that is elders teaching the young ones to be humanitarians. And this is true for my family. And it goes back a very long time. My grandfather was a physician in Singapore, which is where we're from. And polio was rampant. And he knew that in the city areas, the vaccines were available. But the many, many villages out in the jungles and up on the mountains had no access to healthcare at all, nevertheless vaccines, and they were getting hit hard from it. So he would take his paycheck, he would buy vaccines, and he would strap, a pack on his back, hike out to these villages in the jungles and vaccinate entire villages to try and make sure that these men, women, and children were protected. And that really struck me as, he's taking his own money, but he's also taking his own time, his energy, his knowledge, and doing good with it. Then we come to my own mother. My mother was very much the same. She was always giving to other people, and growing up, we frequently had complete strangers sleeping at our house all the time. It was her way of providing shelter to those in need. And so there was almost never a time longer than maybe 2 or 3 weeks when somebody was not sleeping in our spare room, eating our food. We would learn from them. We never had a bad experience with that. These were people that were in need, trying to get on their feet. They would stay for a few weeks to a few months, and then they would move on with their lives in a much better situation and prepared for what was to come. And then down to me, my mother being an immigrant. I also grew up around immigrants and refugees. And I, in turn, wanted to give back to the community. As a child, I would go all over North Carolina. I'd visit schools talking about my Chinese heritage, singing traditional songs, performing traditional dances, just to spread the word about who we were. And when I was young, there have been people from China in this area for many, many years, but it was very much a much smaller minority than it is today. So I'm going to move into what is driving migration. Now, migration is a movement of people from one place to another with the intention of settling in their new location. And there are some main drivers of migration. One is education, which is how my mother came here, to get an education. Greensboro, having 5 universities, is definitely well placed to have people migrate here in order to further their education. So that has built up the international population in our area. The second one is what a lot of people think about, and that's economic opportunities. Being able to go somewhere to make a better life for themselves and their families. And when you think about that, you might think they could do fine in their home country. But in some cases, there is no food, there is no water, there is nothing, they're starving. So economic opportunities is not simply, I want to get rich, it's, I want to be able to survive. Then you have others who move to escape conflict, persecution, terrorism, or human rights violations. And this is where we come to refugees and immigrants who are fleeing for their life and they have nowhere else to go. The final one that people don't talk enough about is climate change. Climate change is and has been for a while a very big driver for migration, and that includes refugees. If you speak to some of our clients, I remember when we had clients coming from Burma, one of the reasons the Karen people had been so persecuted, there are lots of reasons, but one of the reasons was the Burmese government wanted their land because China wanted to build a dam for hydroelectric power, and they didn't have enough water to do it. And so they wanted the water resources of the Karen province to do that. Flip over to Africa. You often hear about villages being attacked. But if you get to the root of it and really talk to some of these refugees, it was because their village had access to water. Water is a main driver of refugees. It's why people are getting hurt, and it's why people are having to flee. And that is something I hope you will keep in the back of your mind, because as climate change continues to get worse and worse and worse, we are going to see more and more disasters, stronger hurricanes, and more people being displaced and becoming refugees due to something that is completely preventable. Hopefully still preventable. So why is North Carolina, specifically the Greensboro Triad area, a main location for refugees to come here? Well, one, it has always been welcoming, and a lot of that is due to Quakers. Quakers moved to North Carolina from Pennsylvania. There are people in this room that probably know the history better than I do, because I didn't go to Guilford. Sorry. But the Quakers came here, and the Quaker spirit is very open. It's very loving, and they welcomed anybody regardless of where they were from. We had Irish migrants come here because they were treated like dirt in other parts of the country. But the Quakers opened their arms and their hospitality to them living here. The same goes for other nations, other nationalities, people coming. It has been rooted from the start, because of the Quakers, that this is a welcoming place to be. Second up of why people move here is that we had really good manufacturing job prospects, and we had low cost housing. The housing thing is no longer true, but we still do have good job prospects in North Carolina. And I already mentioned the universities bringing in students from all over the world, but it still doesn't say why refugees actually came here. And it's a mix of things. The first refugees that were officially refugees after the Refugee Act, we're looking at the Cambodians and the Montagnards, the Southeast Asian populations that worked with our soldiers in Vietnam. Now, unlike a lot of other populations, they actually had a group of elders that they brought here first, and they chose 10 sites around the country for them to tour. And when they toured, and in those sites they had the manufacturing jobs, good jobs, and housing. When they toured, they picked Greensboro. And they said, because it's green and it reminds us of home. We're close to the ocean, it's one day's ride, and we're close to the mountains. And so they picked it because they felt like it's as close to home as they're going to get. And that's what we all want, is home. And when you flee, it doesn't mean you hate your home. You still want it. And so having something familiar like the rolling hills comforted them. And that's why they started coming here. And of course, once one population starts coming and thriving, others will follow. The US government went, oh, Greensboro knows how to do this. Let's send them there. And so to this day, we still do get refugees and immigrants coming here. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes. Yes. The Vietnam War. So New Arrivals Institute, which is where I work, I'm executive director there, we have a mission of assisting refugees and immigrants with self-sufficiency and U.S. citizenship through education. So while I am not a college professor, and do not envy your job as a college professor, I am very passionate about education. I always have been. As a child, I was told to become an educator, and I said, absolutely not. I didn't want to deal with parents. I just didn't want that. But I have always felt like if you really want someone to be self-sufficient, they don't just need to know the language. They need to be able to navigate everyday life. They need to have good jobs. They need to know how to do those good jobs. They need to know how to thrive in our community. And that's what we want to look at. So whenever we have any kind of service, I want that educational piece built into it, because I don't need someone that's been here 10 years and still doesn't know how to renew their license. No, you need to learn these things for yourself. Our vision, which I love, is a community that welcomes refugees and immigrants and provides them with the tools they need to achieve their goals. It is incredibly American and incredibly horrible, because Americans seem to think, oh, this is what you need to do. This is what you want. No, it is up to a refugee what they want to do, where they want to be, how they want to live. We can help guide them, but ultimately, if we're talking about freedoms, they have the freedom to do that. Does that mean that I like all of the decisions my clients made? Nope. But when they do ask me, what would I do in a situation? I often say, I know what I would do, but that might not be the right decision for you, because you are not me and your family is not my family. We need to be giving people the opportunity to be who they are and guide them as they request it. So we are looked at very much in the community as a safety net organization for refugees and immigrants. We have a slew of services, most of which are done in partnership with other agencies like Faith Action, like CNNC, like ECAR, because my philosophy is I don't have to be good at everything, but I need to be able to know who to contact who is good at it. And I need to build those relationships so that we're working as a Greensboro team to help strengthen our community. But we do have English language training. Knowing English is incredibly helpful. That includes adult classes, and hooked onto it is a preschool, because it was determined in the late 90s that women with young children were unable to access services because English classes could not have children in them. So funding was applied for and received to start a preschool to go along with the adult education program. We also do skills recertification. That is taking somebody's diploma and transcripts from overseas, translating it into English, and then having it evaluated to see what is the equivalent in this country. That is something that is incredibly useful. You do not have to be a refugee to come with us to do that. We do it for many, many people. And it gives some legitimacy to their hard work in universities or high school or whatever it was overseas, and really can show an employer, even if it's not in that particular field, can show them that this person does have skills. We also do vocational education and vocational skills training, so training somebody for a specific job like CNA, welding, those kinds of things. We have health access and literacy. I feel like health is something that is a foundation for everything else we do, and in all these services, I promise you there is education. We have a refugee school impact program, which helps kids get into school and gets their parents active in their education. We want them actively involved so they're more likely to graduate. We have case management, but in case management, we show them what to do. We don't just do it for them. Yeah, it takes more time, but that time is worth it because they're able to then take control of their own lives and do it themselves. And then, of course, we have citizenship preparedness. So I just wanted to end on two more quotes. One is another Chinese proverb: reading 10,000 books is not as useful as traveling 10,000 miles. It's another Chinese proverb, and what it means, and I love to read buy Dia's book, by the way, it's wonderful, is that experience is more important than theory. So for all of you people who are still in college, it's great to be in college, and to learn things, but if you're not putting that to use, if you're not getting out there and doing something with it, then it is a complete waste of time. So I would encourage you to take this time to not just learn, but to do. And finally, from Thomas Jefferson, yes, I'm going with an American. Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask, act. Action will delineate and define you. And I do believe that very strongly. We are called to act, not just listen, not just hang out back, act. That can be simple things like going to vote. It could be attending the Unity Walk. But let your voice be heard, because if you don't, then to me, you have nothing to complain about. Thank you.